Hey, this is Russ. Let's compare e-bikes. Recently, I got a comment from one of our viewers, Juan, and he asked me what my opinion was between the RadCity 4 and the new RadCity 5 Plus. Now, admittedly, I've never seen these bikes in person. I've never ridden them. All I've ever seen of them was on the Rad Power Bikes website and also from comments from other riders who own them. And I read all the various bike forums and stuff on Facebook and other places. So I have some knowledge based on what people have said, okay, but I don't have firsthand knowledge. So before comments come in saying that you can't make a video like this because you've never had experience with it, I can make this video. Here's why. If you're an average consumer, you have to make some choices of how you're going to buy your bike. And this is the process I would do if I were to buy one of these two bikes. Okay, so it's just my own personal opinion, how I would look at it and how I would be thinking, is it worth upgrading to the new model? Okay, so let's look at it that way. Now, I do own a Rad Rover 5. They do now have a Rad Rover 6 Plus, okay? And I'll put a photo of my bike here. Now, if you look at my bike, I've made some changes to my bike. All right, I've changed out the batteries, I've changed out the brake system. There's changes on my bike, all right? So we'll talk a little bit about that and how that works out with this new comparison between the RadCity bikes. So I think the first thing people will look at is they look at price. Now, the RadCity 4 is currently $15.99, and the new RadCity 5 Plus is $19.99. So we're talking a $400 price difference. So the question really is what do you get for $400 more, and is that $400 increase worth it? All right. So let's talk about that. Now, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that the RadCity might have been $14.99 at one time. They had a price increase in January. So I think this might have been one of the bikes that went up in price. And most of their bikes that went up about $100 because they claim the supply chain things. They've held off as long as they can, but they can't hold off forever. So they've brought their prices up a little bit. All right. So, okay. So anyways, $400 price difference. Here's the things that the RadCity 4 has versus the RadCity 5 Plus. Okay. And I'm going to look at the website as well, which is sitting behind my camera. So if I look off camera, you know why. So they claim an 11% more range. Well, that's happening because they've changed the motor. All right. The RadCity 4 has a different type of motor. If you look at the two photos here, you can see that there's a different type of motor on the back hub. All right. The older model had regenerative braking, which means that when you brake on the bike, it actually generates a little bit of electricity, which gets stored back into the battery. All right. So you would think, okay, well, that's a good thing, right? But from comments that I've read from other people, they said that whatever is stored is so minute that you don't really notice much improvement whether you were braking or not. And if it was, they couldn't tell, okay? So maybe that whole regenerative braking thing isn't such a big deal, right? But there's a whole 11% more range that they're claiming is because the new motor gives you a little bit more range than a typical motor, hub motor might give. That's what they're claiming, okay? 11% sounds like a decent amount, but in reality, it might not be that much more. You might get a mile or two out of it. And let's talk about this whole mileage stuff too, because if you read some of these things from bikes, they'll say something, our bikes can give you anything, say from 25 to 40 miles an hour, 25 to 40 miles of range, okay? The reality is it's probably closer to the 25 than it is to the 40. I think the only way you can get those higher numbers is if you're riding on flat terrain. Okay, you're using pedal assist level 1, and if you're riding and you weigh like a lot lower than me. If you weigh like I weigh and you carry all the stuff that I do and you go up and down some hills like I do, you're not getting to 40 miles out of it. You're going to be closer to that 25-mile range specification. So you have to kind of see that, whatever they tell you that your maximum range is, the chances of you getting that is pretty slim. And you have to be slim in order to get it, all right? So I never get that. So, but they claim 11% more range. They claim smoother stops. Yes, you get smoother stops because they now have gone to a hydraulic brake system. And the older RadCity 4 has the mechanical brake system. Now, it's not that like the mechanical brakes can't stop your bike. They will, but you will probably stop better with the hydraulic system. All right. The whole thing with the mechanical systems are these: the brake pads. You have two brake pads. Okay. On a hydraulic system, left side and right side brake pad go in to brake against the rotor. Okay. On a mechanical system, one brake stays in one position. Only one side moves in and out to brake. This is kind of similar to like the old rim brakes when you had side pull brakes. You remember those? One side stayed still, but the other side moved in and it pushed in against your rim of your tire, okay, of your wheel. But in the mechanical systems today with the rotor system, it's the same thing. One side stays still, the other side moves in. So it's not as evenly pushed, and you're constantly adjusting that brake pad as it wears down. You have to move it closer and closer, and then the cable stretches a little bit, and you might have to readjust the cable system. It's a lot of work, and every time I used to go out for bike rides, I would check my tire pressures and my brakes, and I would have to make adjustments on the brakes. Every couple of rides, I'd have to readjust the brakes. Got to the point where it was just too much of a headache, so I says, I'm going to switch to hydraulic calipers. Now, the calipers means only the physical part that touches your rotor is hydraulic, but the cabling is still the old wire cable. So it's not as good as the full hydraulic system, but better than solely mechanical. So those brake calipers cost me $149. So now other people have said that you could have bought cheaper hydraulic calipers, but I looked at those things, and I've looked at all the variety of options on Amazon, and I chose the Juintech M1s, which was branded Bolton eBikes, because I bought it from Bolton. Bolton changed their name too, by the way. It's now called Area 13. I think he had a copyright issue with the name Bolton eBikes, so he had to change his whole company name. Too bad for him. I mean, it's a lot of things to change over because people aren't familiar with that new branding, but that's what they're called now. Anyways, mine was $149. You could buy cheaper ones, but you don't want cheap stuff. You want stuff that can work well. And some of the cheaper ones didn't have good reviews. Not that there wasn't perfect reviews with the Juintech, because the Juintechs had some reviews that weren't so nice either. But in general, the Juintechs had a decent review. I don't think you brake harder with it. I think it brakes pretty much the same as the mechanical one, but less headaches. You don't have to keep adjusting. Okay, so that's why I made my changes. So you get full hydraulic brakes on the new version of the RadCity 5 Plus. They say sleek, easy, removable, semi-integrated battery. That's true. The new 5 Plus, the battery kind of sits inside the down tube of the bike. So part of the battery sits in there, part of the battery sticks up. So really, you don't see a huge battery sticking out of there. Now, that's perfectly fine if that's the only battery you want to use, all right? But for me, I wanted more range of distance, and so I changed out my battery to a triangle battery. And so you could do that with this battery too. But if you pull out that battery, you've got a semi-hollowed out section that your new battery sits on top of. Doesn't go into that section anymore. So in my mind, the down tube might be stronger on the older bike than maybe on the new one. I may be wrong because of whether the battery's in there or not. The frame is the frame, okay. But if you do plan to put a triangle battery in there like I did, it's sitting on top of a rail now. It's not really on top of the tube because it's hollowed out. So you got to kind of think about what you plan to do for distance. If you're only gonna try to travel, let's say 25 miles. I don't know what the full range is on these bikes, but let's say 25 miles. Then there's no reason to buy another battery. You can just use what comes with the bike. Okay. If you want to go distance like me, then I changed out the triangle battery, going to a triangle battery, and then I added a second triangle battery, which sits on my rear rack. So I can do, if I'm conservative on my pedal assist and not using throttles a lot, I could do about 90 miles easy with the two batteries. But without it, if just the standard 14 amp hour, 48 volt battery that comes on a Rad power bike, I was able to do maybe 26 miles on average. Let's say 26 to 28 even. If I was real conservative in my throttling and everything, I could probably do 26 to 28 miles. But now, between the two batteries, I can do about 90. So there's a big difference. Now, 26 miles seems like a lot, but think about it. If you're riding someplace, 26 miles means you could only ride 13 miles away, and then you got 13 miles to ride back home. So you only have a distance of really 13 miles. That's how I've always looked at it. So my 90-mile distance with the two batteries that I have now would be 45 miles away from me and 45 miles back home. That's how you have to kind of look at it. So if you think you need that kind of range, then the integrated battery thing may not be a big deal because it's not going to give you enough. Because those batteries, even on the new bike, is 48 volts, 14 amp hours. I'm riding 52 volts, 20 amp hours times 2. All right. So something to think about. All right. Better hill climbing capabilities. Yeah, with the new motor, they claim that their new motor has a little bit better ability to climb up hills. I don't know for a fact what that really means and how well it does because I've never ridden one, but that's what they claim. All right. And they also say it's more comfortable for more riders. This is because I think the standover height is lower now. So if your inseam is not that long, this bike will be easier to ride because I think it's lower. So they claim bike riders between 5'4" and 6'5". I think a guy with 6'5" might think this bike might be not big enough for him. So, anyways, if your inseam is a little bit shorter, you would probably be able to clear that top tube a little bit easier. They have a step-through version of this bike too, but I'm talking about the step-over version. Riding made simple. What does that say here? Oh, there's a split display screens and stuff now. I don't really care. That doesn't mean anything to my riding experience other than the fact that you can see certain functions differently. And enhanced stability. It says better suspension. Okay, well, we'll assume that's correct, that it does better. It says it's shorter suspension with a new frame. Okay, whatever. So let's talk about was it worth it? Okay, for $400. If you were to get the $400 cheaper version, the older version, you would have the older motor. Okay, the regenerative brake motor. Now you know that they've gotten away from that 100%, and there's got to be a reasoning behind that. Okay, either because of supply chain issues, or because it didn't make that much of a difference. I have no idea. Okay, but I would start wondering, why did they move away from that motor, and why was that the only model that had that one type of motor? Right? So in that sense, maybe the more expensive version might be worth it. I don't know. If you change the brakes, okay, you can buy cheap hydraulic brake calipers if you want. Mine's cost about $149. I think a full hydraulic caliper system would probably be between $150 to $200, I would imagine, something like that. I'm talking decent ones. I'm not talking some cheap ones that you can find on Amazon or something. I'm talking something maybe decent. I would expect to spend at least $150 to $200 on a system like that. So right there, half the price is in the brake already. If the motor is stronger, it might be worth the $200. If the lower size look of the battery is more important for you, then that might be worth that $200 more. Okay, if you're looking at upgrading your brakes on the older system. So really, is $400 worth it? I think you really have to kind of see, what do I plan to do? If you want distance, might not be worth it because you might be changing that battery. Okay. If you want good braking power, it might be worth it because then you don't have to physically change that brake system yourself. I mean, it's already there, okay? So ultimately, only you can make the decision, is it worth it? For me, what would I do? Okay, so here's my opinion, but again, it's based on my needs, not based on maybe your needs. In my opinion, for this bike, it might be worth it. Now, if you look at it on the Rad Rover, I said it wasn't worth upgrading. And the reason is because I would have changed the battery out. I would have changed the brakes and all that stuff. On this version, I think I don't want that older motor system. Yeah, I think I'd rather have the newer motor that they have in there. And knowing that I would probably change out the brake anyways, the cost between the two of those two things being changed over could add up to $300 to $400 more if I were to retrofit it to my old RadCity 4 version. So in a sense, $400 more might be worth the money for it. Okay, but if you're an occasional rider, you don't need the distance. You don't feel that you care. The brakes might have to be adjusted a little bit more. Then no, it wouldn't be worth the $400. If you're an occasional rider, I don't think it'd be worth it. If you're like me and you're riding 2,600 miles, that brake is important because I go fairly fast now. I typically ride, I would say between 17 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour. Yeah. Most of it's probably hovering around 21, 22 miles an hour. All right. So the brakes are kind of important to me, and having to keep changing it would be a hassle. And having the new motor that might be in this new RadCity 5 Plus, that might be worth it for me. Okay. Now, I didn't think it was worth it for me to upgrade my Rad Rover to a Rad Rover 6. And even now, I would still say I would still buy the Rad Rover 5. And the reason is because I know I'm going to change the battery out. And I don't like the fact that if I change it from the existing battery of the Rad Rover 6 Plus, I'd have like a hollowed out down tube because the battery should fit in there, and I'm not using their battery anymore. Okay. So now you could do this if you wanted more range out of your RadCity bicycles. If you bought the RadCity 5 Plus and you just kept the battery in there, the battery that comes with it that halfway integrates into the down tube, you could just add a secondary battery on your rear rack if you want. Now you would be at 14 amp hours on the battery that comes with Rad, but then you could add like a 20 amp hour battery on the other one, so you'd have a total of 34 amp hours to run with. Okay, I have a total of 40 amp hours because I have 20 and 20, but you would be at 14 and 20. The whole point is, if you do this though, you'd have to modify your bike and the cabling. Okay, you'd have to go in and change the electrical system a little bit. So you have to feel comfortable soldering parts together and all that thing. If you feel comfortable with that, you can make that change. It would void your warranty if you do it. So you have to be aware of that too. If you're handy, you can do it. If you're not, don't do that. All right. Anyways, that's my analysis of these things and whether I would make the change or I wouldn't. But again, you have to make the decision yourself whether it was worth it for you to do that or not. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll talk to you guys next time.